Welcome back. Thank you very much for connecting with us once again. This is the 5th episode of our ESI webinar series, a series where we discuss how entrepreneurship, startups, and innovation are contributing to shape the post-pandemic recovery across ASEAN and its dialogue partners. I'm Giulia Marsan, and I'm here together with TJ Ooi from Curated Connectors, a Singapore-based startup, and Lina Maulidina, also from ERIA like me, to co-host this webinar series. And this webinar series, because we have TJ, is in itself a public-private people partnership. So we are very much in the spirit of today's conversation with the series itself. As I've just said, we are covering today a topic that is crucial for innovation and more in general for the post-pandemic recovery, and that is partnerships and collaboration. We know it from many reports, many academic studies, that to solve complex global challenges, we need collaborative approaches, we need to break silos, we need to connect the dots and different points of view from many types of stakeholders around the same table. The public sector, but also very much the private sector, from larger to smaller firms, and the citizens and individuals, since we can all play our part and give a contribution in thinking, finding solutions, finding innovative approaches. So we are here today to continue our conversations, and we will be doing so with great speakers from the Asian Development Bank, the Philippines, Brunei, and Indonesia. And TJ will introduce them in detail in a minute. But before that, let me just remind you that for those of you who are interested, you will find a couple of resources from our publication related to the conversation today and more in general, our webinar series. So please keep an eye to the links that will be shared to the chat box. And in case you missed our previous episodes, you can find the video recordings of ESI 1 to 4 on our ERIA YouTube channel together with many other videos. Finally, I would like to remind you to please keep your microphone on mute during the entire duration of the webinar, but we have a chat box, let's use it. I think you have already started. Also, let's use it to ask questions to our speakers because we will get back to your questions during the Q&A part of the webinar towards the end. But I think now it's time for me to stop talking and give the floor to TJ to start our conversation. Over to you, TJ, now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Giulia, for the introductions. And welcome all our participants once again for joining us. We are very privileged this afternoon to have 4 distinguished speakers from around the region. And I think one of the winning formulas of this series has really been the whole regional flavor that we've managed to bring to our conversation. So let me just start very quick to introduce our speakers. Our first speaker is Ms. Kris Libunao. She's the Executive Director and Chief Sustainability Officer of SmartCT in the Philippines. She's a pioneer in the smart city space in the Philippines and an internationally certified sustainability practitioner and project management professional. She trained under the ASEAN Smart Cities Leaders Program of ASEAN Foundation and Data Stewardship under the GovLab of New York University. She is also a Smart Sustainable Cities instructor with IoT Academy and International Telecommunications Union Academy. With almost a decade of policy research consultancies with government agencies, international organizations, and private companies, Kris's current commitment is to create a movement transforming how the world thinks, does, and plans smart cities, beginning in the Philippines and to the developing countries. So welcome, Kris, and thank you for joining us. Our next speaker is Mr. Dhabit Firdaus. He's the CEO and co-founder BP Media from Brunei. Dhabit is a serial entrepreneur and an advocate to the local startup community. He founded his first startup, Holders Media, back in 2015, specializing in digital marketing and edtech. Being a graduate from a startup bootcamp and accelerator program co-hosted by Darussalam Enterprise and Golden Equator Singapore, along with the experience that he has, the mentorships and the solid foundation in entrepreneurship, he then went on to found Holders Design and Holders Company, one an interior design and building construction firm, the other a mobile e-commerce business. Thereafter, he merged everything under one roof with a co-founder and now known as Holders Group and Partner. And recently, he also co-founded an online news publication, the Brunei Post. Like he said, a serial entrepreneur indeed. So welcome, Dhabit. And next we have Ms. Shanti Jagannathan, Principal Education Specialist from the Asian Development Bank. Shanti is she works in the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department of ADB. And within ADB, her focus is on education sector policies, strategies, and she provides technical advice to ADB's leading lending and non-lending education operations in the Asia and Pacific region. With over 25 years of experience in education sector transformation initiatives, Shanti has led also policy research studies on skills for greening economies, Asia's knowledge-based economies, innovation, and implications of Industry 4.0 on education and training, among others. Her recent work includes guidance notes on education and COVID-19 in Asia and the Pacific, designing hackathons for digital reskilling and upskilling for displaced workers, and co-editing a book on powering a learning society during an age of disruption. I know she has over a dozen publications from her work at ADB. Besides all that, Shanti has also contributed to international cooperation in education at policy and operational levels. Prior to that, she worked in the European Union, as well as for the Indian Council for Research on International Economic Relations. So welcome and thank you so much for joining us, Shanti. And our final speaker from Indonesia is Ms. Dwina Putri, co-founder and chief operating officer of MauBelajarApa. She was born and grew up in Jakarta, founded her sanctuary in art since she was a kid. She took a major step to shape herself in art in 2008 by taking a major in craft design at the Bandung Institute of Technology, where later on, she met a friend who also then became a business partner, where they created a ceramic studio named Dwell Pottery. Right after she graduated, she was hired to join some big firms as a consultant designer, program associate. But in 2016, I guess her entrepreneurial spirit began to rise up, and she was introduced to MauBelajarApa, the largest workshops directory platform in Indonesia. And she joined the team really with the main reason to really want to see how she could contribute to the vision as well as the mission to power up this startup. And in the coming years, Dwina has shared that she hopes MauBelajarApa can help its anchor to inspire Indonesians the way that this company has inspired her to share her dreams to the people. We will hear more from her, and welcome. Thank you for joining us. So these are our four speakers for this afternoon. Before I start off with the first round of questions, I just want to encourage our participants once again. The chat box is there for you to pose the questions that you may have for our speakers as we move along in this session. Feel free to just put it in, and then we will collate all the questions for the Q&A later on. So let me jump straight into our questions for our speakers this afternoon. To Shanti, let me start with you looking at things on a macro level. Shanti, the ADB has worked very closely with the public, private, and people sectors. I hope you can share with us some of the initiatives you are working on to foster closer collaborations with these three sectors? Shanti, the floor is yours. Shanti, if you could unmute your mic, please.
Thank you, TJ, and thank you, ERIA, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to join this forum today. Partnerships and collaborations are at the heart of ADB's development work. We often look at how we partner with our developing member countries as a finance plus model, where as a development bank, ADB provides funding to partner governments to tackle development issues. But while at the same time, we think about the partnership as a way of leveraging the plus of knowledge partnerships with ourselves and with other entities, and also for more evidence-based policy formulation and so on, but also leveraging additional financing and additional resources through partnerships. So it is very at the heart of how we operate. So maybe I can share some examples from the education sector group, which is where I work, in terms of our projects and activities. And let me start with the role of the private sector first. A significant part of our portfolio in education is to do with skills development for competitiveness and jobs. During the 2021-23 period, ADB's program has a program pipeline of about 6 billion, of which about 37% is for skills development. We have skills development projects in over 25 countries in the Asia and Pacific region. And when we think about investing in skills, so we think about skills for jobs and jobs of the future. This obviously we cannot do this without collaboration with the private sector, since jobs are really created there and skills provided by training institutions have to be matched to the demand. So ADB has a strong portfolio in technical and professional training, and when we design and plan these, we are very cognizant of the very rapid changes taking place in the economic sector and the rapidly transforming labor market landscape. So when we invest to improve quality and delivery of training programs in our partner countries, we look for strong partnerships with private sector. Some of the ways in which we bring in the role of the private sector is to promote, for instance, like the creation and strengthening of sector skills councils with the participation of industry, by promoting enterprise-based training, by encouraging industry participation in like curriculum development and the renewal of courses in training institutions, in programs for faculty development that involve industry collaboration, and also by encouraging the participation of companies in apprenticeship programs and on-the-job training that training institutions can collaborate in. And in more recent times, we've also been helping to promote business incubation centers and innovation centers in training institutions to encourage students to pursue alternative pathways to jobs, to become entrepreneurs and to be innovators. So this is a recognition also of the growing startup culture and the aspirations of the millennials, and to really support the young people to explore opportunities in the region. So the private sector role is like critical to ensure that skills development is demand-led and serves the interest of the economy in improving competitiveness, and also to assist the economies to go up the value chain. And so in many of our partner countries, we support skills development programs and courses that actually serve as engines of economic growth. But as a development bank, we're also equally concerned with ensuring adequate policy environment to enable these initiatives to thrive and also benefit people. So for that, we undertake dialogue with government partners, the public sector institutions, to undertake appropriate policy reforms and provide the enabling environment in which these private sectors can thrive, partnerships can thrive. So we have a suite of financial instruments through which we can undertake this. and by which we encourage and ensure adequate policy development. Like for instance, we have policy-based loans where the formulation of specific policies and enacting of certain laws and regulations that are agreed as part of financing programs, which are critical to the success of the investment programs that we do. So we also have financing instruments like results-based funding, which help to ensure that policy is actually implemented on the ground, and the results that are derived from the implementation of those policies are also tracked and understood. So those are all then linked into a financing arrangement that we make with our government partners. So a number of public institutions, including governance-related institutions, play a part in making this happen. Then come the matter of the interest of the people, particularly the disadvantaged and excluded. ADB has a very high priority attached to gender inclusion, and it's a big corporate level priority for us, for all our investments and all our projects and programs, which are put through the lens of gender equity assessment. So our projects include gender action plans and other instruments that help to improve opportunities for girls and women. And these are critical. These are seen as critical to the success of our projects. So success of the project is also measured by how well it was implemented in favor of girls and women. So in addition, we also, at the beginning of the project design, we also undertake what's called an initial poverty and social assessment. We develop like a project-specific strategy of poverty reduction and social strategy to guide the sort of equity investment interventions, so that we can ensure that the project benefits people, particularly from disadvantaged groups and vulnerable populations. So we focus on girls, on youth, and on remote people from remote locations and so on. So where needed, we also prepare like special plans for indigenous people if they happen to be in the project area. So we collaborate with our partners to ensure that adequate consultative mechanisms are in place to bring the voice of beneficiaries in project design. So, and like in education programs, we ensure that we incorporate scholarships and other equity features so that the opportunities are available more widely, and they're also target people who are who may be otherwise excluded from the mainstream. So increasingly, we see that a key issue of equity is around digital capabilities and connectivity. This is, I mean, we are all aware that this has really been brought to the foreground as a result of the pandemic. So we've noted that there are several short-term collaborations that telco partners have done to provide zero-rated data for plans for education, because all education institutions closed down and everything moved online. So that to ensure that those who lack connectivity can benefit from education that completely moved online. So going forward, we see this as an important measure of equity and ensuring connectivity and so on. So in the context of skills development, so we believe that digital skills will become very crucial to succeed in the workforce. That's why we have this number of initiatives going to assess the implications of Industry 4.0 and skills for jobs, and how to support these in collaboration with private sector, training partners, as well as people's associations.
Fully agree, fully agree. Yeah, thank you so much, Shanti. And I think it's very important in the whole engagement process, like you shared, that there is policy discussions with the public sector, there is engagement discussions with the private sector to ensure relevancy. And then I think like what you ended off sharing, really reaching out to the people, across different stratas, whether it's rural, urban, whether it's the inequalities, to ensure that everyone has the opportunity. So thank you so much for your sharing. It's a very good start to really painting our 3P partnership discussion this afternoon. Let me move on to Kris. Kris, in your work, you must constantly have to engage with public organizations, the private sector, as well as the people sector, because we are talking about smart cities smart city developments after all. So, Kris, in the countries that you have been involved with, how has the experience been? And I'm sure that there would have been challenges faced. In those challenges, maybe you could share with us how you overcame them as well. So, Kris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, TJ. First, let me thank, ERIA for this opportunity. This is a great opportunity to connect with the brilliant minds here. The question was about the challenges, experiences that I dealt with when it comes to engaging the public, private, and people sector, of course, in line with my work. This is a very important question, really, especially when it comes to smart cities and digital transformation, as mentioned by TJ earlier. In digital transformation, especially in government and in cities, we often think of just three P's, which is basically the public, private, and partnership. Yes, we may throw collaboration, we may throw capacity building here and there, but in my experience, this is kind of like always an afterthought and it's not really a priority. So in most, if not all, digital transformation projects, especially in developing countries like the Philippines, the priority of the government is to get the digital transformation projects up and running right away. How? They look for technology vendors, and of course, they look for resources to fund these particular projects. Thus, going back again, your usual three P's, which is public and private partnerships. So why did I mention this? I mentioned this because I really believe that this is one of the reasons why 70% of e-governance, of digital transformation in the government fail globally. And yet, this still holds true in most developing countries I work in and I work with, and of course, I researched about. However, working with our partners in European Union, however, the experience is very different. The scenario is very different as well. When you look at their projects in smart cities, when you look at their projects in digital transformation, they involve the people sector right on the get-go. They prioritize accessibility, they prioritize sustainability, and even literacy over technologies and systems. So on to your next question, which is a big question. How did I overcome this, challenges? I guess I would answer this. I overcome this with intense and great difficulty. For my organization in Smart City, our approach is hyper-local. So what do I mean by hyper-local? First, rather than focus on assisting big, mega cities, we focus on smaller and medium municipalities and cities. Why do we do that? Because for us, we find them more flexible. We find them more agile and nimble. And of course, the leaders in this particular cities and communities are quite, what do you call this? They have a direct understanding of what is really happening on the ground, on what's the problem on the ground. Second reason that we have is that we also prioritize partnering with universities and patching them up with the local governments. And third, the way we do it in Smart City is that we create open source communities on the ground to ensure the sustainability with the local governments and to sustain the projects, the digital transformation projects in the local governments beyond, the change of leadership. Mostly the digital projects, if especially in the government, once, there's a change of leadership, it will be put on halt. So uh, you really need to build a community on the ground to support that. With this, however, partnering with, I guess, the private sector and the technology companies who are willing to work with us, to work with smaller and medium communities is still a challenge. As of course, they tend to, choose bigger and rich and more developed communities to sell their products or to implement their products. That being said, however, I believe it is a great opportunity for startups to come in. Okay? So if anything, this has given me more, more optimism in terms of the future. So yeah, at the end of the day, the future lies in public, private, and of course, people collaboration, especially when it comes to technologies, so that we can maximally benefit from the digital transformation, so that the technology can also be maximally beneficial for everyone, even for smaller and even for medium cities, and not just the privileged few. On to you, TJ. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that sharing, Kris. I like the term hyper-local. I think it's important to really go onto the ground, to hear the ground, to have a very good feel of the ground, and to let the work start from the ground so that it has a continuity. So thank you very much for sharing that. Let me move on then to another sector, to Dwina. Dwina, as an entrepreneur in the education business, you will probably also have to engage, the tripartite organizations to ensure that your content is relevant and perhaps aligned to national education agendas. Please do share with us your journey. In this, where we talk to entrepreneurs, we always want to hear not just the challenges, but really, how you overcame them. So, Dwina, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, TJ. MauBelajarApa itself, we're more focused on non-academics one. So for vocational skills, the differentiations between another education stack is we focus on the vocational skills for the people after graduate in university. Our challenge itself is from the regulations in government, but I guess most of the country might have the same challenge with us. So in educations, because as a startup, sometimes we move faster than the market and faster than the regulations itself in the government. So we need to challenge ourselves to stick to the regulations, but still we can handle the demand of the market. And another challenge is to educate the market, because here in Indonesia, maybe the people is not really focused on the non-academics. There's a skill gap between the fresh graduates to the certain demand in the companies when they are want to work for the companies. I like the terms of the Kris that said before that they started from the communities. So in MauBelajarApa, we started also from the communities, because we feel like it's the easiest way to educate the market is through the communities, because through the communities we can networking with the people with the same visions and missions. Another challenge is Indonesia is quite wide in the area. So there's urban, suburban, and also the rural ones. So for the digitalizations, maybe it's another challenge to digitalizations in the rural area. So it's kind of hard for us to reach the market in the rural area. And maybe they certain way lack of the skills and vocationals, and it's quite hard to keep up with the industries now, because it's hard to reach them in the rural area. And a good thing is since 2020, the government started programs named pre-employment programs. So to fix the skill gap between the markets and the company or the industry, there's help from the governments for the people who wants to take a certain training to skill up or leveling up their skills, to join the programs named pre-employment programs, and MauBelajarApa appointed as one of the partners of the governments. So actually it's our first projects to support the government from our sides. I must say in Indonesia, because our culture is more likely to like gathering or with the communities, we can move the markets more fast than we do it ourselves. So that's why we're open to collaborations between the public, privates, and the people. Especially we started from the private sector, because we find that a lot of individual teachers or the communities teachers or the event organizers that can share their knowledge without have to have a certain certifications. So we started from that private sectors. And for the public sectors, for now, because there are certain ministry that have a special program also for the employment programs, we supported some ministry also as part of our collaborations with the public sectors. But since 2020, because of the pandemic, we found that education sites, especially in non-academics one, is growth more fast because a lot of people started to give more attentions and highlights to vocational skills especially. And I think that's all from our side, from my side especially. Back to you, TJ.
Thank you very much, Dwina. I think I like what you shared about, you know, going down to the ground, similar to Kris, where you find the needs of the local communities and then to move fast to try to, you know, come up with programs that will then facilitate and meet those needs. Over here in Singapore, we call it part of the lifelong learning journey or the continuous education training, which I personally believe is actually very important. Beyond graduation, the training, the skills, vocational or otherwise that you pick up, I think it's very important. And I guess one of the ways that we do see then partnerships taking place, and also the learning, the whole imparting of knowledge and skills would come from, you know, accelerator programs, boot camps that are very often these days co-hosted by a public entity as well as possibly a private organization. And with that, you know, I want to shift over to Dhabit in Brunei, because Dhabit, you were a graduate from a startup bootcamp and accelerator program that was co-hosted by Darussalam Enterprise and Golden Equator Singapore. Like I said, I think this is a very great example, a very good example of public-private type of collaboration. You know, in the next few minutes, please do share with us your experience and how it has helped you with what you are doing now. So Dhabit, over to you, the floor is yours. If you could unmute your mic. Yes.
Hello. Hello, everyone. It's good to be here. First of all, I'm really grateful and honored to be here with all of the amazing speakers in this panel, and also to the wonderful audience after the sessions. So when I started back then, I was actually juggling between trying to run a startup and also at the same time being a student trying to pursue my higher national diploma, right? So at that point of time, I was also clueless and everything was all over the place. So honestly, I came from a IT background, okay, from secondary school up until my diploma level. I don't know how to do proper accounting. I don't know how to plan for success roadmap, okay? And then I don't have a network of people that can help me and guide me throughout the journey. So I've never seen a lean canvas before. So it's alien to me, right? So based on a recommendation from a good friend of mine, he said, "Hey, David, I think you should join their micro bootcamp program, so and see if they can help you out, right?" So I decided to participate, and I got into the program. So I was also in the cycle 3 of the program. I think it was back in 2019. So the program was co-organized by Darussalam Enterprise, or in short, is there, and also Golden Equator Consulting from Singapore, right? So actually, from there onwards, I was able to meet with a lot of new people who share the same vision as me, and those who aspire of being an entrepreneur. So we also learn about each other's business, each other's challenges, and we together find ways on how to find a solution to our own challenges, which is quite good, right? Because the Golden Equator team of mentors also conducted a range of classes. Okay, so they aim to equip us with standard skill set and knowledge, and also how to run a successful startup. And yes, they did, right? So they equip us with all of the basic knowledge in accounting, in marketing, in networking, so on and so forth. So after that, I was assigned a mentor during both programs. One of the mentors that was assigned to me was Adam Splinter. He was the managing partner of Golden Equator itself. So whatever entrepreneurship backgrounds that he has, he shares it with all of us, including me as the mentees. So I find that it's a really great type of partnerships between me and the consulting firms, and also there being on the other part, bringing or being the co-host of the program. They also help me out with several other things pertaining to my business, right? So at the end of the bootcamp, they actually give out some perks for example, to use some of the facilities that are being provided by DARE at the Center Incubation Space. So it is known as the only startup hub in Brunei. It's just a small space in the middle of the city, but that's where all of the entrepreneurs gather, share ideas, change solutions and such, right? And that's where we can see amazing partnerships happen all the time. So it's not just from the private sectors itself, but also from the public and also from the government sectors. Okay. So I was really glad that I joined both programs. That it really helped me a lot, even up until this day. I'm still connecting with them, and they also come up with several other tenders or contracts that they specialize for startups to apply, right? So this is another way of them trying to help these little startups to navigate through now we know that the economy is quite competitive, right? So it's hard when you are just a small fish in the oceans fighting with a big whale, right? So at the end of the day, they also provide a co-matching grant for student graduates, which can be up to 10K, which is quite a lot to kickstart your business, and then a maximum of 20K for expansions. But nevertheless, both organizations have helped me a lot throughout my entrepreneurship journey. Those skills and knowledge that I've learned helped me a lot in navigating through the challenges that I face at the moment, especially in the digitally transformed era.
Thanks so much. Yeah. Thanks so much, Dhabit. Yeah, really, it's very important, especially among entrepreneurs, even for myself in this whole equation, that there is communication. There is that interaction between entrepreneurs to entrepreneurs, those that are starting up and those that are more established, so that there is also a knowledge transfer. So thank you so much for sharing that. I want to hold you, I want to just keep you on because for the next round of questions, I will start with you. In the area of digital media and marketing, how important is tripartite partnerships to you? And, I think if we look at Brunei, what more do you think can be done to foster greater collaborations? Yeah, if you could share your thoughts, please.
Right. Personally, I think, first of all, I think the Brunei government have done quite an impressive job in the recent years in trying to foster greater collaborations between the government itself, the private sectors, and people in the nations, right? So even before the pandemic hits, there were quite a lot of social dialogue being carried out to discuss on important social issues, and then economic developments, our unemployment issues, among others, right? So the efforts also continue to expand during the pandemic itself, through online webinars and even after the lockdown. The involvement of the government, the industry leaders, as well as the people in general, key towards achieving competitive advantage, right? So I solely believe in this actually. So when all of these trees burn up together, right? So it can bring a lot of competitive edge to the economy. It also brings towards innovations and the overall national progress, right? So especially in the post-pandemic, where the digital era is now booming, right? So I think the Brunei government, with the consent of His Majesty the Sultan, have introduced the Digital Economic Council, which is called DEC, right? It is to facilitate and support the growth of digital transformation in the nation. But it is also to foster collaborations between the three components in the tripartite partnerships, right? And with the introduction of the Digital Economy Master Plan I think back in 2020, right? So it embodies the visions, the enablers, and the strategies on digital economy to propel the nation as a smart nation. This is the visions that Brunei have, right? So I think it's also a great example of a working collaboration between the government and the private sectors. Okay? Learning institutions, for example, NGOs, and also the people in general. So the result of this collaboration, I think it will also help digital media business like us, right? Not only in the digital marketing field or in the digital business field, right? So it helps to expand not only throughout the nations, but also to be able for us to make business beyond the borders with the help of the government itself and other parts of the tripartite partnerships. So we can see that the smaller startups are now working with the bigger corporations in Brunei. Okay, so it's not just the bigger corporation monopolizing the industry itself, but they are also helping us, because it's like, when you are an expert in baking, for example, right? So it's not necessarily that you are an expert in science. So it's definitely that you need other people's expertise to combine with everything that you have, so that you can produce a very good results. So now the government is also in line with the Digital Economy Master Plan that Brunei have. They're also working with the private sectors to actually expand the nationwide payment system, proper digital healthcare, and among others. So I think continuous efforts to identify gaps and challenges, including the partnerships with international organizations, for example, right? So it's not just internal parties that we're dealing with, but I think it's also important to have collaborations from the outside parties from the national level. Okay, so I think continuous efforts on this will help the nations to actually propel to become one of the smart nations in the Southeast Asian region.
Thank you so much, Dhabit. Very good sharing. especially when you were talking about really that continued engagement to identify complementary strengths so that we can foster greater collaboration, not just domestically but also cross-border. I think that's very important, especially as we go post-pandemic, in a whole digital economy and a digital transformation age. So thank you so much for sharing. Let me move on now to Indonesia. Back to Dwina. Dwina, in your field, lifelong learning, of course, is of growing importance, not just in developed, but I think more so in developing countries, like you shared earlier. In this business of empowering individuals, Dwina, what more do you think needs to be done, can be done, in terms of the whole public-private people partnership within Indonesia? We would love to hear your thoughts on this, Dwina.
Thanks, TJ. So I guess the answer is to collaborate more, because within the same industries, we have to start to collaborate, because like we saw now, the industry intended to make a collaborations with some industry, the cross-industry one, but they missed to make a collaborations within the same sectors or the same industry. So for example, maybe for us as well, we need to start to collaborate with more education tech company also. And another one is to encourage the practitioners or the expertise to share more knowledge to others from through the community. And maybe we can try to highlighting the local heroes and makes more local heroes, because people more intended to hear the stories that related to their life from the others that maybe share the same experience with them. And the last one is maybe to involve the government also in the project or the programs that can share the same visions. For example, to reach the rural area, because like I said before, it's harder to reach the rural area because for the digitalizations programs, it's quite hard to reach them. Maybe we can start from the micro business to encourage the micro business and more entrepreneurships in rural areas, started from because it's the easiest way, I think, to support the microeconomy as well. I guess the answer is to start sharing the knowledge and the expertise studies from ourselves. Maybe as an individuals, we can start to share the knowledge to peoples around us, and mix more programs like you said before, like incubator programs or the startup programs. Maybe because everyone now is focused on the startups. And the other part is sometimes we miss to give enough spotlight to the micro business as well. But the fact is the micro business, they also can support the microeconomy as well. Maybe it's easier for the people from the middle low, because we are in developing countries. Maybe it's easiest for the people that come from the middle low class to start entrepreneurships as a micro business before they can start the bigger business as an entrepreneurs, because being an entrepreneur is not just about how big is your business, but also it's about the visions and the soul inside you that as entrepreneurs, I guess, and to grow the entrepreneurship's mindsets is a challenge. It's another challenge to grow the entrepreneurship's mindsets, because with the growth of the startups that quite fast, and a lot of people wants to be an entrepreneurs, but they miss what's the mindset that they can they need to have as an entrepreneurs. That's why maybe we can start as a micro business entrepreneurs, started as an individual. I think that's all, TJ.
Thanks very much, Dwina. I like what you shared about encouraging the micro enterprises, the MSMEs, to really, and encouraging people to embark on micro businesses to start, as well as also this whole thing. We are now, different speakers have been sharing about this common thread called knowledge sharing. I think it's very important, for businesses that are joining us today. It's not just about being competitive. It's not just about competition, but it's also sharing. Sharing of what works, what doesn't work, and how can we best collaborate together. Before I move on to Kris, I just want to take a pause here to say, for our participants, please feel free to pose any questions you have in the chat box, because I think the speakers are here. Their expertise is there. Good to glean from them, as we continue to converse and to share. And also, Dwina touched a bit on what were some of the things that ERIA had done as part of this series earlier in the year. I will also encourage you to go to their website to go and visit, have a listen to our second session, for example, that talked about entrepreneurial skills and mindsets that you need for post-pandemic. So let me move on then, back to the Philippines, to Kris. In your business, and I guess as you continue to engage the tripartite, Kris, what factors or ingredients do you think are important to ensure that these type of partnerships can succeed and flourish in a post-pandemic era? Over to you, Kris.
Thank you. That's a big, question, and I would like to answer this as tangible as possible. So the question was about, the critical factors to consider for successful public, private, and people partnerships. So for me, I think the first step would be trust, and of course, understanding where the stakeholders are coming from. So we need to suspend judgment and assume the best intentions amongst each other. Of course, this is, easier said than done, but this can easily be applied if you want to really implement this tripartite partnerships in your own projects. I'll give you like few examples. For example, you work with a government. You noticed that they prioritized procurement over citizen engagement, over capacity building. It is easy for us to conclude that perhaps this might be due to the money involved in the procurement. But what I realized is that sometimes compliance with rules and regulations made them prioritize such. On the other hand, if we work with the private sector, we should also understand that this is a give and take. At the end of the day, they are for profit organizations, right? And of course, there's nothing wrong with that. So in summary, if we really want to orchestrate, the successful tripartite partnerships, these people, public and private partnerships, not only we need to understand what's in it for them, what's in it for us, but as mentioned earlier, we can also leverage on their strengths. The public sector, their strengths, of course, is in coordinating and directing through regulations and policies. The private sector, of course, in responding flexibly, in responding nimbly, and of course, their resources. And of course, we should not forget the people sector, which is they have the most understanding. They have the direct understanding of on the ground problems that we want to solve. So that's trust. And another related factor in terms of trust would be openness and having this, network mindset that you already mentioned earlier. That, a network mindset. What's a network mindset? Wherever you come from, for example, be it you come from private sector or you come from people sector or public sector, we need to treat them as allies instead. Again, of course, this is easier said than done. So, again, I'm coming from the lens of digital transformation in governments, and this is fairly a fast evolving field. And the government cannot do it alone. They cannot do it alone. Let's accept that. Experience and history also show that when it comes to digital government, the usual partnership, which is just the private and public sector partnership, does not necessarily translates to successful digital transformation. So in the digital era, of course, the residents, the civil society, the academics, the private sector need to collaborate with the public officials to mobilize the data and technologies. So what are the practical examples of the same? Of course, if you are government, if you're from the government or if you're from the private sector, which wants to develop, you want to develop a technology, you need to reach out to the residents and ask what kind of digital services they want and engage them in designing and implementing these services. So in summary, I would say that in the digital world, which is today, really, if we are to connect our citizens, if we are to connect our citizens to the public sector and vice versa, and for this collaboration, the private, public, and people sectors to really succeed, we must provide, tailor-fitted services, tailor-fitted projects to what our citizens and what our residents need. While doing so, we should also ensure that these services still protect, their rights and of course, their well-being as well. So basically, we cannot really do what we're doing right now, the status quo. The usual public-private partnerships left us, with projects with no one uses, and initiatives that the people do not really ask for, and they don't know how to use it. So this will really require a culture shift, if you may say, from top-down approach to a more collaborative approach right on the get-go, not an afterthought, from an open by exception to open by default, and from technology focused or solution focused to people first. So that's it for me. So over to you, TJ.
Thank you very much. In every session, we have new terms that come out from our speakers. Today we've heard hyperlocal, and then you shared this other phrase, network mindset. And I think all these are important, and especially what you shared at the end in terms of a cultural mindset shift that is needed for these tripartite partnerships to flourish as we move ahead. So thank you so much for sharing. Let me just move on to complete the round of questions to Shanti. In ADB, and I think around the world really, sustainable development and climate change are issues that have been deliberated upon. Factored with those are also then the whole digital transformation, smart city development. Everything is coming together. Shanti, from your work in the ADB, can you share with us what more needs to be done? Whether you echo the same sentiments, but what more needs to be done so that we can move all these agendas forward?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I think this is like a really evolving area for the future, and effective work in this area can really have like multiple benefits. Like, and the COP26 is like spotlighting issues around climate change and sustainability. Although this is like a long-standing debate, it's kind of putting a little bit more spotlight because of the events coming up this year. So in fact, I would say that there are two mega trends that can be combined to create double wins. One is that, the whole climate resilient development, and the other is digitalization. Actually, Kris spoke about smart cities, right? This is one perfect example of how these two mega trends can come together, like in a fruitful way. The digitalization can really also contribute to climate resilience in the sense of, reducing travel, reducing waste, and more, is promoting circular economies, and also making things more effective and efficient. Like things like digital learning, online learning can expand the scope of opportunities for education for so many more people than is possible by just brick and mortar universities. So, we have, in many countries, we have gross enrollment ratio of, in higher education of 10%, 15%. Now we have the possibility to scale it up, double it, triple it, with online and digital modalities. And you made references to small and medium enterprises and hyperlocal solutions. So localized development solutions can be such powerful tools for municipal corporations. So governments have a really important role to play, to set the tone, to enable technologies to become affordable. For instance, how do, a small and medium enterprise may not have the capacity. So some, solutions, some incentives, some subsidies, and so on. How to make technologies more available. Like, I come from India, and India and China are known for their frugal innovation. And there are so many wonderful, wonderful stories of how this, very bottom of the pyramid technologies, very affordable technologies have contributed to, energy for, we're still energy deficient. We still have so many villages and places that are not electrified. So they've used technology so nicely to bring real development change happen. So governments have a very important role to play, but also private sector in developing those affordable products and services. So they're both products and services, both matter. Increasingly consumers are becoming aware, and they want more sustainable products and services, things that are grown sustainably and so on. So that will drive private sector to produce those things. And governments can make, the enabling environment to help with technologies. And on the people side, greater awareness building. So COP26 is also stressing the importance of awareness around these things. And in ADB, in the strategy 2030 is all about intersectoral collaboration. So instead of calling urban development, we're saying livable cities. How can we make solutions available to our urban cities that make life more comfortable and more rewarding for everybody? So these are some of the ways. Development partners also need to work with actors on the ground. Education institutions have to play a part. Develop new ways of addressing these things, making more hyperlocal solutions, like you mentioned. And private sector can really make the engine of growth happen through affordable products and services.
Thank you so much, Shanti. Thank you to all our speakers. Really great sharing from you. And thank you for the participants, because the questions have suddenly come in fast and furious. So I will quickly hand over the floor to my colleague, co-host Lina, who will then take over for the Q&A segment. Lina, over to you.
All right. Thank you to TJ and to all of the speakers for a great discussion. So in this short timing session, I will point out some questions from the audiences and address to each of the speakers, since I'm also curious to know the answers. So the first question is, if I tweak a bit, although the digitalizations might enable to narrow the development gap, from the speakers, we know that some challenges that you've been mentioned is focusing to nurture the urban-rural divide. as well as mentioned by our colleagues Ilan from ASEAN Foundations, who has supported the implementations of enhancing digital skills for marginalized people. He also faces the same challenges, which is the main structure itself is infrastructure and digital connectivity without proper access to ICT or information communication technology, especially in Indonesia, Philippines as archipelago countries, as well as Brunei. So we would like to know from the entrepreneurial mindset or answer perspective first. What is your view on this, and how do you think the PPP itself play a role to leverage the access to ICT based on your perspective or based on what you've been doing so far? So maybe I would like to give the floor first to Kris and then to Dwina and to Dhabit. Kris, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Lina, and thanks for, I believe it's from Ilan, no? From ASEAN
Yes.
Foundation in terms of this particular question. So the question was, what do I think about, the ICT infrastructure challenge in terms of the marginalized community and the underserved community that we work with? So yeah, we've experienced that. In fact, one of our pilot, cities, they do not have, one of our big challenges is that they do not have a, what they call that, a wired connection in terms of internet. So they rely on Wi-Fi, and it's really hard to hold, like online training and digital skills training over, Zoom and over, over the internet. So I agree with you that it's really important. I agree with you that it's really important to look into private and public partnerships in terms of ICT infrastructure. But you mentioned earlier that a proper ICT infrastructure. So first we need to define what's a proper ICT infrastructure. Are you talking about, the internet infrastructure? Are you talking about the telecommunication infrastructure? Because telecommunication infrastructure is just one of the foundations in terms of our digital transformation. Let us not forget that while building this infrastructure, technological infrastructure, we also need to build the infrastructure in terms of our policies. So we cannot really, what they call this, address the ICT infrastructure in silo, that okay, let's build the internet connection and that's it. We need to do such by a more holistic approach. Let's look into, okay, let's build like a better internet connection with the help of the public and private sector. But perhaps there's a policy that can intervene in terms of implementing such. So we really need to look to that as well. And the second thing that we need to look at are the skills of the people. If you build the internet infrastructure in this particular community, who will, do they have the capacity to what they call this, to sustain that? So I want to emphasize that in terms of any digital transformation effort, it should be a people, public, and private sector mindset. We need to look, ICT infrastructure is important, but while addressing such, we also need to look at the people sector. We also need to look at the public sector. In terms of your question of what they call this, of the digital infrastructures and between the digital, which is important, kind of like which is important, the digital infrastructure or the digital skills training first. I believe that it's not uh, uh, an or question, or it can be both. So simultaneously we can address such. Currently, what I noticed in the Philippines or in developing countries, we push for technological infrastructure. So we push for apps and all, without really dealing with the digital skills and the data skills of the people. So again, in terms of addressing the digital divide, I hope our approach really is not in silos. Yes, ICT infrastructure is important, but simultaneously, the skills of the people, the capacity of the people, and of course, the policy is something to look into as well. So that's it for me. Over to you, Lina.
Thank you, Kris. Very concise and relevant answers. So, Dwina, maybe the floor is yours now, sharing perspective from Indonesia.
Okay, so I agree with what Kris said, because if we're talking about ICT infrastructure, and we're talking about the rural area, especially in Indonesia, because we're the archipelago country, sometimes we are too focused to digitalize the area, but the actual that they needed is not really the digitalizations. Digitalizations is not always the answers to certain area, or especially in rural areas. So the first thing we have to do is we need to find what kind of need in that certain areas. For example, maybe for example in Indonesia, especially in the rural area, they don't really need an internet connections or like the another ICT infrastructures. Maybe the first help that they need is more to level up their hard skills, because they don't even have the access to certain trainers or certain sources to teach them about the hard skills, and maybe we can do the digitalizations later after we solve the problems, the basic problems in the area first. And like I said before, we need to more focus on the small industry, especially in rural areas. We cannot force them to start the digitalization soon. We can start from the small one. I think we need to start small steps at the time, not really focus with the or make the same standards with the big cities or with the urban areas. I think that's the answer for to answers Ilan's questions about the ICT infrastructures.
Thank you, Dwina, for sharing from Indonesian perspective. Dhabit, are you still here? Okay, I guess.
Hello?
Yes, okay, I see you on the car now. Yeah. Would you like to share your views on that?
Okay, first of all, I think what Kris and Dwina have been sharing is quite good, and then I think it's also true that we need to actually focus on the digital workforce, right? So by having the technology advancements in the nation is quite good, but if you're lacking of the digital workforce that you have internally, then it makes no progress, right? So I personally think that the need for a digitally focused workforce is essential in this area. So digital transformations in a nation or in a certain country is actually also you need to look into certain policies that is limiting the growth of the infrastructure itself, right? So, for example, in Brunei, we are known for having the most expensive broadband fee or rate. Even for my case, my broadband is about $100 Singapore dollars monthly for only about like 50 or 68 gig. It's quite expensive. So what the government needs to do is they need to look into certain policies that is actually inhibiting the growth of the infrastructure, and to also train the millennials and the new generations on the use of data analytics, and then to become more focused on the efforts of transforming the whole infrastructure. So I think it's also good that we get help from international parties or international organizations to help the country to develop the infrastructure itself and also certain policies. That's where we can see collaborations and partnerships to actually facilitate and to train the people in the country itself. So I guess that's my view on the ICT infrastructure and the digital transformation era.
Yes, thank you, Dhabit, for sharing your perspective. And I'm afraid that we're running out of time, but we would like to hear from Shanti. Shanti, I know that you gave your answers in the last questions, a bit of it. Would you mind to share more about it? And there is also a question if in the midterm 5 years, the program of ICT from the government is not working, what should bridging programs could be done, or what kind of bridging programs that must be suitable?
Sorry, can you repeat the second part?
If in the midterm 5 years, the program of ICT is not working by the government, what bridging programs that could be done to elevate it? Thank you.
Okay, no, so I'll try to keep it brief. I think in the medium to longer term, I think there is really no alternative but to build the digital infrastructure. I think there's no other way, because the pace of the digital transformation in every aspect of life and living, whether it's including citizen services, government services, education, health, e-commerce, everything is becoming digital. So in the medium to longer term, that will have to be invested in. But in the short term, leading up to the medium term, some interim solutions and some creative solutions can be found where, for instance, in most parts of Asia, the mobile networks have made the last mile. So how can, to some extent, we can tap that as a stopgap measure to provide the connectivity needed, is already being used by many different players to do that. And I also mentioned that, for education, many telcos during the pandemic collaborated to provide zero-rated plans. So we can think of some, some measures by which the more essential parts of development services from a digital mode can be supported by foundations. Like, governments alone cannot do it. So we also need support from foundations, development partners, and other agencies. But I also have the caution that technology alone cannot solve everything. So the fundamental core of whether the quality of training, quality of services also have to be upgraded. And that is when the technology will work. So technology alone will not solve the problem. And 5 years from now, and I think COVID has really highlighted the need for rapid action in this space. And I think a lot of advocacy would help, and which is already underway. And also more innovative, like, now people are talking about satellite-based connectivity, where the physical connectivity may continue to be a challenge in rural areas. So I think technology itself is going to give us more solutions to the sort of how to bridge the gap. And I think, the title of this event being partnerships, that's where public-private partners, as well as foundations and community bodies, municipal corporations, they all have a role to play.
Yes, thank you for the answers. And some of questions are keep coming, but due to time constraints, we are not able to answer all of that. But I believe all the speakers here would be delighted to connect with you on the LinkedIn, for instance. So please feel free to connect with them. And in the short timing, I also would like to ask your participations, the audiences, to fill in the post survey. That would be great if you can give the answers to this link. And in return, we will exchange with the certificate for those of you who need it. Again, that's all for today's discussion. Thank you to all of the great speakers, and back to you, TJ.
Thanks very much. I really appreciate the sharing. And I think Giulia would want to just have some closing remarks as well.
Thank you, TJ. Thank you, Lina. And thank most of all speakers. I learned a lot, as I always do, during our conversation. I think that participants fully agree with me. Very, very briefly, because we are already late, I really learned about, let's say, new keywords that we certainly are going to use in the future. One was certainly hyperlocal, which is also very much, I think, about embracing this amazing diversity of local ecosystem and think about development solutions that are relevant for different communities. There is no one single model about innovation and being an entrepreneur. So it's not just, building a tech startup in a garage, maybe, by white male entrepreneurs, the typical Silicon Valley model. There are many, many different ways to be an innovator, a disruptor. And this is actually what we also want to showcase during this webinar series, showing and showcases different types of entrepreneurs, different types of business models and mindsets. And I also very, very much like, this idea of the network mindset, which is, I think, very much connected to how we define the entrepreneurial mindset, which we very much discussed during this series. And I think, the network mindset is very much about connecting the dots and breaking silos, what I tried to say at the very beginning. And again, it's not something only for entrepreneurs. As Shanti said just a few seconds ago, that was actually, I think, the perfect conclusion of this webinar. Even if you're a policymaker, you can have a network mindset. And when you think about developing policy to strengthen the digital infrastructure in your region, you should couple it with, skills development policies so that people can actually use and adopt these technologies and make them relevant for their local communities. So again, we really learned a lot. I would like to thank once again Shanti, Dwina, Kris, and Dhabit. We also had the speaker on the move today. Dhabit, thank you very much for connecting from multiple locations. And I think we can definitely close the webinar by now. And we look forward to welcoming back all of you in 4 weeks' time with our next episode that will be on accelerator and incubators. So please stay tuned, more information coming very soon. Thank you very much again, and hopefully see you soon back here.
Thank you very much, everyone. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye.